By sunrise, Master Othric Varnal, Brug, his Ogren driver and bodyguard, and myself embarked on board an old, repurposed grain hauler. Our long, usual seasonal trip to the capital to get more slaves is an anxiety-inducing event, not devoid of danger. But the breathtaking landscape views from the hauler offers some measure of consolation. Endless seas of grain fields, extending farther than what the mind could fathom, and covering continents' worth of cultivated land, make the planet the jewel of the system, and one of the main breadbaskets of the segmentum. The planet has finally healed, so we thought, as the agri-world of Thessera Prime recovered its production levels from pre-Plague Wars times. Boasting a yield unequaled in the entire system, the planet is its biggest by far and most fertile. A miraculous fertility, regained from the ravages of the bio-wars, in fact. Therefore so precious to the Imperium. Yet when time started to take its toll on the harvesters, and the need for repair was repeatedly relayed to the Mechanicum, little help was dispatched. We were told the Mechanicum is needed elsewhere. The Mechanicum is always busy. And yet, despite this technological decline, the need for our grain never waned, and the tithes remained unchanged, if not increased, throughout the last decades. By the time the main harvesters of old ceased to function altogether, there were no inbound technical expertise to re-enable such ancient technology. The little assistance that was promised would have taken a century, if not more, to arrive. It was around this time that the lords of Thessera started to refranchise agro-slavery and abolished death sentencing in favour of mandatory servitor conversions throughout the entire system. For a farming workforce needed to be created, then brought to complement the work of the few machines left. At first, it was publicised that such policy was a temporary solution until help would come. But the illusion of such promise quickly faded once the Zargvanung program started. That is, the almost coffin-like apartments built in scale to house slaves and servitors, and which would transform the capital port city of Harness Deep into a population-swelled hive city, the first of its kind on Thessera Prime. It was early afternoon when we finally arrived to Harness Deep. After we loaded our weapons, we left the hauler and headed directly to the orphanage. Master Othric does no longer purchase adult slaves, only rarely to replace state-sponsored harvesters. He is interested in orphaned children, and Ludmilla, the headmistress of the orphanage of Suburb 77, was, as agreed, waiting for him. 30 this time, she said without greeting. Displeased, he muttered, "We agreed on 70, to which she replied, "Some died, some got recruited. Gangs, cults, revolutionaries. They have food, you see. The thing with orphans, nobody asks when they gone missing. And that is not only true in your case." Othric dismissingly answered, "Do I have to pay for their food now?" Ludmilla, with a glacial look, then said, "If you want to beat the competition, yeah. Now where are my worms?" By worms, she was referring to what became an alternative currency in the entire segmentum. Worms of the gravebloom fly, worm nails as they are most commonly called, became treasure for heretics, seeking extremely painful stimuli experiences. Dropped in the eye, the worm makes its way through the optical canal to the brain, where it grows into a fly, which in turn exits through the same way it came. Some cultists use it as a passage rite, others for torture, or again to fuel their rage in combat. The fly is deemed a public hazard, the worm trade was outlawed, and is punishable by death. But with the harvester crisis, cracking down on the illicit commerce of worms was not a priority, neither for the merchant leagues nor the administratum. In the militarum, some factions even secretly encouraged the trade, as the near-fatal use of worm nails helped dwindle the ranks of heretics. First looking left, then right, Othric reached for wooden boxes in his coat and handed Ludmilla a couple. "Make sure you don't get robbed or killed," he said warningly. Unheeding, she replied, "Death is better than this hellhole." As we were escorting the children to the hauler, Othric pointed me to 2 hooded men he said have been following us from the orphanage. "Man the Gatling cannon," he asked, when he opened the rear of the ship, while suddenly barking for Brugg to start handcuffing the children. "Speed it up. We have to move." When we took off, he was still cursing the ruling bureaucrats, whom he blames for plunging the city into its current desolate state. Rightly so, as the world government was mainly made of bureaucrats and merchants, unexperienced to manage a billion-strong population. 20 years ago, fearing the high death toll that the dispatch of a large slave workforce would entail, the Thesseran High Command tried to avoid unwanted blame, or worse, investigations from the administratum, by delegating the forced labor to the feudal, land-owning nobility of the planet. At best, they were more experienced at managing their own serfs, and at worst, they could take the blame in case of unmet quotas and cruel exactions were needed. Each feudal landlord received a number of slaves relative to the size of his lands, as well as the number of harvesters his house used to own. They called it the Great Distribution, and that was the decree by which I came into the service of such landlord, Master Othric. Relatively a small number of slaves did he receive, however, due to his humbler domain. Most of them were children, elderly or diseased. Back then, when he filed a complaint about his slave workforce, not likely to survive next winter, the sub-prefectural administrator reassured him that new workers are constantly arriving to Thessera Prime, and that he could file a worker replenishment request. Othric was fuming at the response, as he perfectly knew that to get new slaves, he should grease the slow bureaucratic machinery by paying a lot of bribes. That is in fact just enough workers to meet the grain quotas as tithes to the government. To him, a clear drain of his capital, which he originally wanted to dedicate to his secret project. As one of the few adult slaves he got in the Great Distribution, I was picked to become Othric's accountant and came to know much of his secrets. Like most of his peers, he was an ambitious, greedy and cruel man, but unlike them, he wanted to become richer not by scheming to grab more land, but through the clandestine worm trade. "Do you think Ludmilla sent these guys after us?" "Do you think she knows of my garden?" he asked me midway. Although not inclined to believe so, he asked me all the same, like he does on each of these trips. This was not the first time we were followed. Approaching Othric's domain, the sensor still detected the 3 Arvus lighters that were tailing us since we departed Harness Deep. Master Othric instructed us to put on our masks, gloves and suits, and for Brugg to land in the garden. Well hidden between the massive grain fields, the garden was in fact a swamp where he cultivated the worms. As soon as we landed, our pursuers followed suit. 9 hooded men with las rifles approached us, their leader loud. "Hands up! Now, where are the worms?" Othric, amused at the sight of them struggling to swat away the swarm of biting flies, responded, "We grow worms underwater." As the leader of the hooded pack resumed talking, he fell to his knees, vomiting. His acolytes fell soon after, as the fly-transmitted pox was clearly taking hold. After we shot them, Othric instructed me to burn the bodies before they turned into walkers. The swamp, Othric once told me, was a territory that the Collegium Sanitas missed in its walking pox decontamination campaign in the aftermath of the Plague Wars. The House of Varnau managed to keep it a secret, a graveyard for their rivals throughout the years. Experimenting with walkers, Othric had bigger plans for his worm business, however. All started when he discovered that the gravebloom fly is not only a vector of the walking pox, but that it can lay eggs in the eyes of walkers similarly as it does with the non-infected. Farming walkers for worms He needed to hide them, however. Undying, they can live underwater, he later found out when he caged and drowned a specimen. Finally, he wickedly optimized the process further by relying on children-turned-walkers, which are easier to hide and provided better worm yield. The swamp farm counts now thousands of undead children, most from the orphanage, that are held in customized crustacean cages underwater. As I removed the last corpse, I spotted Othric and Brug making gill-like cuts behind the now diseased orphan's ears. This is to prevent any bloating with water later on. As the Ogryn was putting them then into their cage, he consoled them in his own manner. "Soon pain go away." A rare moment of empathy in this garden of death. As the last cage was finally put in water, a green bright light suddenly shined under, and we could hear the walkers' mummed in-water wailing. A greenish, horned, childlike creature jumped from the water and grinned. "So much despair. So much despair." As it was laughing and clapping its hands, Brug laughingly, as if joining its celebration, "The baby talks." The creature approached to address a shocked Othric, who took a step backwards. "You tended the pox and gave despair where despair was already festering, and with it, you made here a way into the grandfather's garden. Rejoice, when these orphans have no father. Now blessed, they have a grandfather. He wants to set them free, to walk and spread his blessings. And so, the Lord of Flies wants to make you a plentiful offer."
I hope you enjoyed this first part of a secret tract on Nurglian demons found in the warded vaults of the Grey Knights. If you liked the video, please subscribe and click on the bell button for more content. This will enable us to produce similar videos in the future. Thank you.